Welcome to The Problem, a Lockwood and Co podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
And we're back.
Yay.
Yay.
It's not yay. Yay. That's more how it should be.
I sound low-key, but I have excitement. It's my favorite of the books.
So, book 4, The Creeper's Shadow, is your favorite?
The Creeper's Shadow,
Yeah.
Yep.
This is a handbook for how to stalk your ex-girlfriend and get her back. The Creeper's Shadow.
Yeah, except that, the answer is just be a good person and make sure that she feels good.
Ugh.
Right?
Feminism. Oh my God.
And stop pushing her away. It's actually just about saying whatever you want. Just come back.
Just come back, please, God. Yeah. No, this is a great book. I'm very excited to talk about it. Despite trying to ruin it right there, The Creeping Shadow is, I think, maybe the best book in the series. It's hard. I'm so biased against endings, but there could be a 6th book. I really feel like he could write another one of these books. So maybe
he does.
The next one.
I do think that is one of the best things about book 5 in the way that it comes to a conclusion, but you absolutely could write more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is a satisfying ending.
Yeah.
But we're not, that's 2 books away. We're not there.
I know.
We have had about a month off. Is there any silly chit chat we need to get out of the way that you've been holding on to for the weeks we've been off?
I went and saw Mount Rushmore. It changed my life. It didn't. It's not a great monument, but the area around there was beautiful.
My neurologist has instructed me to eat a spoonful of peanut butter with every meal.
Weird.
Well, this is to help stave off some medication side effects that I get, so
okay.
Mary Poppins was a little off.
Spoonful of peanut butter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there peanut butter back then? There must have been peanut butter.
I have no idea what part of the world peanuts come from.
Oh, that's true. Are they American? Yeah.
Well, not American, but...
Well, some stuff is, like tomatoes and potatoes and stuff.
Right, but yes. I guess I think of peanuts as being more tropical.
Oh, yeah.
I
don't know.
I could be very wrong.
I know they grow them here in America.
But also, I live on the Pacific coast, but we farm Atlantic salmon here, you know?
Right. Yeah, that doesn't
Weird
mean
shit
anything.
Can happen.
Yeah, so peanut butter with every meal.
Yeah, it works. It works fine with breakfast, but speaking of salmon, I had salmon for dinner last night, and when I had to get a scoop of peanut butter, I was like, this is really weird, actually.
Woof. Yeah, that doesn't go together.
I left it till the end. I was just like, I'll just have it afterwards. That's the only weird thing that's happened to me in the past month.
I'm teaching one of my daughters to drive, and so that's probably the weirdest thing going on in my life right now.
That is strange. I don't really know your family at all, obviously. I just hear about them from you, but I always think of your kids as being maximum 12.
Yeah, that's wrong. It's for sure wrong.
That's probably how old she was when we first...
Yeah, when we became friends.
Yeah.
Teenagers. Speaking of...
Yeah, I guess that's a good headway in to part 1 of this book, which is called Two Heads, which is a perfect title.
It's really good. I kept so clever, Stroud. That's really good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because, we find a head and she has a head, but then the two of them together are two. It's so
one.
good.
Yeah. And
it's perfect.
2 heads are better than 1, but are they? Is she really doing better? Is she? I don't think she's doing better.
I see. Now that's interesting. All the other stuff aside, for Lucy's personal growth and confidence in her abilities, I think this separation from the company was really important for her.
Oh, it's totally necessary. Absolutely.
It's necessary because of all the things we talked about at the end of book 3, but also just she talks about how much better she's gotten in these chapters, and I love that for her, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I just feel, and we'll get into it, I feel for her. I'm like, ugh, in so many ways. Oh, yeah,
she's so lonely and upset. Yeah, absolutely.
But here in chapter 1, Lucy and Skull corner a ghost as independent freelance agents working with the Rotwell agency.
And our artwork is the ghost. with the bureau.
Yeah.
Yeah. I even, like, this picture was so clear to me that I flipped through the book and they all look pretty clear. I feel like maybe somebody finally gave the artist a note.
We said that in the last book. The book,
Oh, we did?
Yeah,
Okay.
book 3 was much clearer. So I think it's just like, just pick a scene from each chapter and really do it legibly, please.
Or maybe we just have looked at so many of these now.
We got better at it.
Yeah, we got better at it.
Maybe that's true.
So we start off with Lucy looking for a ghost.
Yep.
As she does.
By herself, right? It's really...
At first, yes.
It's really ambiguous. I think it's written in a way so that when you read this for the first time, you're like, is she with Lockwood and George and Holly? Or what is going on?
She sort of vaguely mentions that there's other people there with her. And it could be Lockwood and Co. And then when that other kid, I think his name is Dave.
I'm not remembering.
Me neither. When he walks in, he's just described as a tall, lanky thing, and that could be Lockwood.
In a long coat. Yeah, like his silhouette is Lockwoodish.
So if you've never read the book before, it keeps you on your toes a little bit to see where Lucy is, based on the ending of book 3. Which, if I had read book 3 as it was released, and I'd been waiting for, like, that would be maddening.
Yeah. I think it's on purpose, yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. The only other person that she's talking to this whole time is Skull, up until that point.
And Skull's great, because, like, we get this really creepy opening paragraph, and then Skull just comes in and breaks the tension.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just like, there's a ghost, help. And she's like, come on, cut it out.
And also, like, if you're thinking about this from the point of view that we know that she has left, it's nice to know she brought Skull with her.
I was really surprised by that. When I read this for the first time, I was like, oh, she has Skull. I mean, it makes sense because he would do no good to the rest of the team, but I don't know. In my mind, he kind of belongs to George, if you could say that right, but he's of no use to George.
Yes, I think I had a similar thought. Not like it made sense to me, absolutely, and I wasn't surprised that she had Skull, especially since we need her to be talking to someone, right? Like, it would be really boring, even more lonely for Lucy a couple chapters here.
Yeah.
If she had nobody to talk to. But it does feel like she stole him. Yeah.
But it makes sense. And especially, like, for my whole, like, going on about, like, he's the Jungian shadow of Lucy's psyche, blah, blah, blah. Like, they are kind of one thing, I think, here in these chapters. There's even...
Especially in these chapters, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, right away, she's, like, trying to look for a mirror, and Skull says to her, if you're looking for the mirror, Lucy, you tied it to the back of the rucksack with a piece of string. And so, like, he understands what she intends without her even saying it. So they're, like, even more enmeshed, I feel, than they were in the third book.
Yeah, and he even sort of says, like, remember you put it there so you wouldn't forget it?
Right.
And that's, like, in a sarcastic tone is exactly how I would think that to myself in that situation.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be like, oh, you put it there so you wouldn't forget. Yeah. You know, like...
This is how you talk to yourself, in other words, yeah.
There's a ghost here that can only be seen in mirrors, which is kind of unique, and we don't really go into that at all, and I wish George was there, because he would be really into that.
I don't think this is, like, a particular category. It just seems like a peculiarity of this individual ghost.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So it's really hard for me to not read things symbolically anyway, but, like, I read this ghost as, like, pretty symbolic of Lucy herself. Like, she can only perceive the ghost as, like, looking in a mirror, which is a way of, like, self-identifying, right? And we talked about the mirror as, you know, a way to, like, understand yourself. She can only see the ghost when she's also seeing herself, and the ghost, like, also has a skull that it's attached to, and it's also very lonely, and it also rejected its lover, and all of, like, there's a lot of similarities between these characters.
You know, I was really not with you. I thought you were reaching until you mentioned that it also has a skull companion. That's interesting, yeah. Because I was like, I'm pretty sure he just chose mirrors because it's super creepy.
Yeah, because it's creepy. And yeah, it's ghosty.
And like, yeah.
The mirror that she forgot, I love the little joke of it.
Like, it doesn't say it, but it is basically a My Little Pony mirror.
Yes.
And I love it.
Skull is like real quality plastic. Love the pink ponies and rainbows.
So then Lucy and Skull do some scrambling around of trying to find the ghost through the mirror. And then they do, and she has very long nails. And is very creepy, and I don't like it.
She's like very like wasted away and like bony and things like, yeah, it's very creepy.
And then this is where Skull says, call the others. And for a moment you're like, oh, is she with her team? You know, is she with Lockwood? But, and then he starts talking about Lockwood.
Right. Yeah.
Or no, I'm so sorry. He says, I know you're annoyed with them.
Right.
But this isn't something to tackle on your own. And that could be Lockwood. And then Lucy says, I've gotten over it. And Skull says, just because Lockwood. And that still kind of makes you think that it's Lockwood and Co. there, but it's not.
And it really, I feel like all of this is like coded to be like, this is the theme of the book, right? For Lucy's story. This is, you know, she's like, oh, I found the ghost. Now, do you want to live or die? Live, please. Call the others. Not yet. And that's like the whole book in a nutshell.
I don't know about the whole, it's certainly the first half of the book.
Yeah.
I think the ending is a little bit different.
That's true. I guess I see it as like the end of the arc and then like the fulfillment of like, I've rejoined the team. Again, like we will read this book as if we are rereading this book. So like, we're not going to like be precious about the spoilers for this book. Yeah, you're right. For like the first 3 acts, I cannot go back. I must not go back. I might go back. I am back. You know, like that kind of motion to the arc.
Yeah. And then even Skull says to her here, like, tell me you're not going to do your silly thing. She's an evil old biddy whose spirit only wishes you harm. There's no need to reach out to her. And like when Skull is your voice of reason, maybe take a look at your life, you know? Take a look at your choices, Lucy.
The Lucy Carlisle formula TM.
Yeah.
I love that. We talked about it since the first book that they know how to hunt ghosts and secure sources, and all of that stuff is in the Fitz manual. That's what the Fitz manual is. And these books are the deconstruction of that method and the building up of the Lucy Carlisle formula, so to speak. And so I feel like she is really in the thick of it. She is perfecting her way.
Yeah, agreed. Like I said, she really... It's mentioned a little bit here. Later on, I'll talk about it then. But she has become more powerful and more confident in her powers. Anyway, so then she asks the ghost what it wants. It doesn't say anything at first. It just sort of keeps reaching out for her. And then she picks up on the words, I still have it. That's cool. And then the Skull is like, but what? Blisters? Bad breath? Who can tell?
Yep. So it's the same tone as the other books, right? Like it's scary and then it's funny, and it's scary and it's funny, which is. And
then the other kid comes in, who for a second the text gives you Lockwood,
like a silhouette of Lockwood. Or
silhouette.
Something,
Oh, Ted. Ted is his name. Ted Daly. Why did I think Dave?
Yeah.
Whatever. Ted Daly. And then I guess to juxtapose that, Lucy is immediately meaner about him than I think she's ever been about anyone in describing him. Like we get sort of confirmation that she's working freelance and that, you know, agencies are just hiring her for one-off jobs and that she's doing okay with it and that she doesn't have a choice with who she works with, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and then we get this 1-paragraph description of Ted and it's terrible. It's like if I were a teenager who heard somebody describe me this way, that'd be it for me. I'd be like, okay, well, I'm out. I'll just go jump off that bridge. It's fine.
Do you want to read it or?
It's a lot. Like, he was a gangly, sad-eyed youth, long in all the wrong places.
It's good.
Goodness, with a permanently semi-open mouth hanging above a scrawny neck. Somehow he always gave the impression of having just swallowed his chin. He had a reedy voice and a tight and nitpicking manner. As a team leader, he had nominal authority over me that evening, but since he ran with his arms flapping like a goose, had the personality of a limp stick of celery, and crucially, didn't seem particularly psychic, I more or less ignored him.
That's great.
That's so and then she goes on to describe the other two people. Oh, there is a Dave. That's why. The other kid is Dave.
Okay, yeah.
The jumpy one. And, like, Jumpy Dave gets probably the kindest description, but it's really just like, he seems fine, except he got freaked out, and now he's ready to throw a salt bomb at anything that moves.
Yeah. I also like that every time that we talk about these characters, in parentheses, we're given their, like, rank within their agency.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such a good way to control children in a like boarding school kind of setting, to be like,
yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
There's so much between their interactions with their supervisor, Mr. Farnaby. So much of it just screams school children, which is so demoralizing.
Yep, an economy of power that's not real. So you'd be like, well, I'm a second class, I'm a third class, whatever, and none of it matters, because like for Lucy, the only thing that matters is competence and ability, and like none of these kids have it anyway. So,
but like, especially with Dave, you get the feeling that they could,
right?
If they weren't part of this stupid system.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, the system is not serving them; it's exploiting them.
Yeah, because like Lucy tries to be like, "Come on, guys, we can do this. We're a good team," and it works until it doesn't.
Yeah. I love that part too, where Skull is like, no, they're not. We're not a good team. She's like, I got to work with what I got.
Yeah. But that's sort of where we are here. They come in just as the ghost disappears into the wall, and Ted is saying that they have to go talk to their supervisor, Mr. Farnaby, and check in with him. And Lucy's like, or we could just get on with the job. I saw where the ghost went. The source is probably in there.
And he's like, you're not our leader. And she's like, no, but I know what I'm doing, which is a nice alternative, which is great.
Yeah. And then eventually she does talk them into not reporting to Mr. Farnaby right away. And they cover her while she looks for how to open the door to the secret room.
Yeah, so she thinks that there's, a secret room, and that it has something to do with this bureau that the ghost was retreating to, and, went through the wall in that area.
Yep.
The latch or the trigger is going to be in the bureau or something.
And then, she finds it eventually, and everything's good. The others are covering her, and then she turns around and sees, like, herself with the ghost behind her in all the mirrors. And I just wrote down, no thanks.
It's very scary that you can't see the ghost. I also saw this shot in my head, like, quote unquote shot from, like, a TV show, of them holding up the mirrors in a way where she can see herself reflected 3 times, where it would be like the mirror is in front of their faces, because them seeing stuff would do them no good because they can't see it either. And so like where their faces should be, her faces and the skulls, that's just how I pictured it in my head. And I was like, oh, it's almost like she's like a whole team of herself or something like that.
Mm. They would certainly be able to do a fun thing with that shot.
Yeah.
If somebody out there ever decided to make a TV show.
Someone should make a show of Lockwood and Co. It's good.
Yeah. But here we are with chapter 2. Lucy finds the source and secures it. It's all Alan wrote down about this one.
Yep. That's basically
I guess that's fair. Yeah. The chapter art is the shattered mirror covered in cobwebs.
It's like I watch a movie and people would just like brush away cobwebs, and I'm like, that's impossible. Nobody's that brave. You can't do that.
Yeah, you have to like have a whole
you have to like whip your fingers and be like, no, get off, and it like is crawling up your arm because you're like actually just spreading it around on yourself, and then you just like flap your whole body.
Nobody's that brave. All right. So chapter 2 starts with basically everybody leaping to save Lucy from the ghost, but Lucy just like stabs her rapier behind her. And then Dave throws a salt bomb or magnesium flare or whatever it is.
And blows the room up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's great. I'm really into this kid, actually. He's great. And I think, like, Lucy of book 2, she'd be like, yes, let's blow it all up.
That would have been her move for sure.
Yeah, yeah. But she's been sadly forced into this position of having to be mature.
Yeah, she's such a badass in these chapters.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, she's blown up and she like, blood coming out of her nose and the kids are all freaked out and she'd like stabbed this thing without being able to see it. There's like ectoplasm all over her blade. She's like, yeah. Anyway, we got to go through the secret passage. And they're like, no, retreat. So it's just great.
It is. And I especially like it after book 3 where I feel like Lucy felt like she just kept messing up.
Yeah.
And therefore the reader felt like Lucy was just messing up over and over again. So it's nice to see her be competent in more ways than one.
Yeah, she's almost soloing this ghost, and it's pretty cool.
After Dave throws the thing, he's like, did I get it? And she's like, no, you didn't. But it was a very good try. And then she says you don't need to chuck another one, so I guess he already had one ready
like he
to
had
go.
it behind his head or something like that.
Yeah. And then, this is where I think Ted is like, you've got a trickle of blood coming from your nose. And Lucy's just like, I know, let's continue on.
Right.
And then I think the others try to convince her to go back to Farnaby again. And she's like, what is Farnaby going to do? Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Adults are useless.
Yeah. She yells at them to think for yourselves for once.
That's the thing that's drummed out of them in the agencies. They, like ironically,
just follow the rules.
Yeah, for the name of the group, they have no agency. Like that's the whole point. They're instruments that are there to be exploited to the process. They're not supposed to be people. They're just supposed to be psychic instruments.
It kind of makes me feel a lot better about Kips.
Yeah.
And I think that is a very smart thing to do. He's been like such a bully the first couple books, and then he had like a good-ish bit at the end of book 3 there. But as we know, he's going to become kind of part of the team in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice to set up that like this is what he's getting over, having this drilled into him for so long.
Yep. And Holly too, to a degree.
Yes.
That's part of why she's so insufferable. Does she go in alone? I'm trying to remember.
She gives them a big talking to about it and then heads in. And I think she says we didn't have to go far. So I guess they do follow her for a bit. She's
basically like, I can't spend my time trying to talk these people into doing this because by the time I do, I will have lost my nerve. And one of the most underlined things in the Kindle edition says, once in a while, you have to be a little reckless. That's a skill I learned somewhere.
Yeah.
Which is like one of the style choices in these early chapters is that Lucy, as the narrator, never directly names Lockwood and Co. Like other characters say Lockwood or they say Lockwood and Co., but not her for a while. She just is constantly making these allusions that like I was part of the best agency or I did or once upon a time kind of stuff.
I don't think that's quite true, but I see what you're saying because like when Skull brought up Lockwood earlier, she said I don't care about Lockwood. Like she said his name.
Oh, did she?
I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to find it. Oh yeah, she said I'm not worrying about Lockwood.
Okay.
And then later on, when she's talking about them having been in the paper, she talks about them.
Yeah. At that point, I think.
You just mean in these first like 2 chapters?
Yeah, I don't mean like in the like part 1 or something.
I thought you meant like part 1. Yeah, okay. I understand.
It was just kind of. I just noticed it as a style choice that he was not being explicit about like Lucy was a part of Lockwood and Co. It's just like a kind of like psychic sidestep that she keeps making where she's thinking about them but not naming them in some kind of important way. I don't
No,
know.
it is true. It is true that she does do that, other than when Skull directly mentions his name.
Yeah. And that later when she talks to Farnaby, he does the same thing. He's like, you are part of Lockwood and Co. She doesn't name it in that explicit way.
So Skull and Lucy have this bit where they're sort of discussing what the source might be.
Right.
And Skull is just being Skull. It says, it could be a toe. And blah, blah, blah. And then Lucy's just like, that's so disgusting. And then Skull has this great bit, which is why I decided to talk about this, because I like this bit, where he says, hey, there's nothing disgusting about random body parts. I'm one myself. It's an honest profession. And I just love Skull.
The reading of it in the audiobook is especially good too.
Because in one of his more recent interviews, Stroud brought up about how Lucy and Skull make each other stronger.
Yeah.
And I really noticed it in these chapters.
Oh, yeah, for sure. She seems to have abilities that she didn't have before, too.
Yeah, and Skull is so much more alive.
Right, yeah. He's got much more verve and personality even than he did in the third book, yeah.
So Lucy heads in to the secret room, and, she's using her My Little Pony mirror and
right.
all these things.
Spiders everywhere.
And eventually she does find the big broken mirror in the secret room. And I guess at this point she says she does say that it's hard doing it on my own. So I guess the rest of the team is gone by then.
I think they turned back because when she does go back, they are already there and have given their report. And he's like reprimanding them and being like,
oh yeah, they absolutely do. But I thought there was, and then she waited, no answer came, and she turned to the secret door. So no, I guess they didn't follow her in at all.
Yeah.
That's when they turned to go back. I should point out that when she said it's hard being on her own, Skull took big offense.
He's like, yeah, one of mine.
Yeah.
I don't think we mentioned either that this ghost, the woman, Emma Marchment, was murdered by her husband with a piece of mirror as a knife, I guess.
Yeah. But he murdered her because she was a big murderer.
Yeah,
she was killing all these family members and stuff. And he was like, okay, well,
she was involved in some kind of necromantic rituals or something where she was.
Lucy seems to think it was all hogwash though, so that not real
murder, but to the ends
real
of
murder,
like
but
magic that's
fake
not
witchcraft.
real. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, he murdered her with a mirror to stop her, which is why the mirror is like important to how she apparates for people.
Yes. But we do get, I think, some very important lines here from Skull where after he points out that he's there too, and Lucy says, I'm on my own. That makes a world of difference, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, how can you say that? We're pals, you and me. She's like, we are so not pals. You've tried to get me killed dozens of times. And then he said, I'm dead too, remember? Maybe I'm lonely. Ever think of that? And from one perspective of what you have pointed out of Skull being, Lucy's inside voice, that's sad.
Yeah.
It really sucks. And then also from the perspective of Skull being in a place where he admits, Skull in books 2 and 3 was just lying and weird and terrible and encouraging them to die and everything, right?
All the time. He was like, oh, great. You fell out the window. Yeah. This is awesome. Yeah.
And now he's like, we're pals and I'm lonely and it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's sad and
he's evolving. He really is changing as a character. And I am so hesitant to be like Skull is just Lucy's inside voice because he is his own character. He has his own arcs. He has his own motivations and desires. So we need to read him as a fully formed character, but it's really difficult for me to resist the symbolic interpretation of him.
I mean, it can be both.
It is both. I think that's
he's
such a good writer because it is both.
Yeah, and I just think that this is the most real thing that Skull has ever said to this date.
Yeah.
And I think this conversation and obviously everything that they've been through on their own here is kind of what motivates Lucy through much of this book, because a lot of it is about finding Skull again.
Mm-hmm. It's also very to undermine what I just said, to read it symbolically is her also saying, I'm lonely, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I don't think she ever actually says that in the coming chapter when describing her life now, but she says it without saying it.
Yeah, she talks around it. A lot like the not saying Lockwood and Co. thing. Like, I used to be part of something.
Anyway, so then the Skull just goes back to being Skull here, where he's like, remember that other ghost with the moaning and blah, 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 blah. And I think he's just trying to convince her to just find the source and not try to connect.
Which is really interesting. It feels like she left the team partially because, well, this is, I guess, my own reading. Because, like, her reason is, like, loving Lockwood will kill him, and like, which is wrong. But the real reason she has to leave is because Lockwood will not permit her to be herself, which is doing this kind of work. So it's interesting that Skull is kind of the voice of Lockwood now in her head of like, don't do that. That's not the way.
I don't read it that way because that's just this one time. I think most times he's pretty encouraging about it.
That's fair because this ghost is malevolent, that she was like doing human sacrifice and like murdering people and stuff. So yeah, that's fair.
So this is the bit where Lucy's about to use her touch talent. And she's sort of describing it. And she does say, in recent months, its accuracy had noticeably improved. I just dropped my book.
Boom.
It had noticeably improved, and it was worth a try here. And so I just underlined that to point out that the working with Skull, making her a stronger thing.
Yeah.
Because I'd never noticed it until Stroud spoke about it in that interview.
I think it's really subtle, but it's definitely there.
Yeah.
I underlined like a line or two later. She says, closing my mind to the present, I opened it to the past, inviting the object to loop me back to long ago, which is a really interesting way to talk about that talent, where it's like displacing time. And we get one of these moments, which we had many times in book 3, where Lucy seems to experience a kind of time dilation where it's like mere seconds for her, but Skull is like, yeah, you were gone for a long time.
Yeah. He says, I hankered for a newspaper and slippers.
Right.
I was that bored. Find anything?
And the agents also say that when she reports back, like she's been gone for a long time. So yeah, it's just interesting how time is like this important theme around the ghosts and stuff. I'm thinking about that because we recently got an email from a listener.
Yeah, I guess we should mention, because so at the end of book 3, we talked about how we thought the fetch was just playing on Lucy's fears and couldn't actually see the future because there's nothing really else about ghosts being able to see the future and that sort of thing. And we got an email, Spotify message, I don't even remember, from a listener whose name I don't know.
It's
Rebecca.
My God,
I feel so bad. Rebecca, okay. Pointing out some time stuff that happens in this book. Mm-hmm. The main one of which that she pointed out, I would say we don't actually have confirmation about that, though it does make sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about it more specifically when we get there, but I technically do think that's just a popular fan theory, not like I don't think Stroud has ever confirmed it.
I don't think so, but there is like,
and if he did, you could argue that that's not even canon, depending on your definition of canon. Anyways,
what's in the text,
yeah. Anyway, but it's an interesting thought that maybe we were wrong about that.
Well, yeah, I don't know about the future stuff. I think is pretty ambiguous, but it's pretty clear in all of the books that, like, I think George even in book 3 refers to ghosts, the condition of ghosts, as like time sickness or something like that. But they're definitely tied to some kind of past. And and a lot of them are caught in some kind of repetition of a past moment. So there's time shenanigans happening. I don't know that they have anything to do with the future, but like, I don't know. I just noticed this where she was saying it's not that she's like delving into the psychic aura of anything, or like she's specifically talking about time and like transporting herself. And then, like I said, we do get the report from Skull that like a lot of time passed, but for her, no time passed. So there's just time dilation stuff happening. I think it's on purpose.
It is interesting, though, because like the sort of classic definition of psychic is being able to see the future.
Right. Yeah.
And So I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I do still feel that the fetch was just playing on Lucy's insecurities, because it like it did, even if it was seeing the future or a possible future or whatever, because it did latch on to the one thing that could really kind of drive her crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it worked. Yeah. I mean, it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I do still feel that way, but it is an interesting thought.
But
anyways, Lucy comes out of it.
Yeah, well, she has a vision. It's important. So, like, she has a vision of the actual past where this lady was, like, you know, in her little secret room and doing witchy stuff. The room is filled with, you know, all of the ingredients for her spells and stuff. And she has, like, this stone thing that, like, that's what she sees, is like a piece of stone that is covering something else up. And so she's like, oh, I got to get that stone out of the wall because that's where the source is. It's behind this stone.
Right. Yes. And then I believe she gets out a crowbar and starts getting at it, and with Skull giving just like really great encouragement.
He's like, speed it up. A mouse could pull that pebble out. Put some beef into it, woman. Yeah. That's good stuff.
I like that one. I should use it sometime.
It's pretty good.
You should say it to your wife.
Yeah, that'll go great.
Yeah. Yep.
That's okay. I bought a very comfortable couch so I can sleep on the couch.
I did not know where you were going with that at the beginning. He does sort of turn his really poor encouragement to mentioning that the ghost is coming and bad things are going to happen. It's
very funny scenario. It's like it undermines its own tension, but I really enjoy it.
Yes, exactly. But the quick back and forth between the two of them kind of creates more tension too, just like different tension.
Yeah, it's true.
Than the creepy tension. Anyways, too late for that. She's here, and then we get Lucy kind of matador. Oh, I said that. I'm not going to say that.
I think that's right, though.
It is, but now we have to leave it. God.
Yeah, she tries to use the what is this, like a silver net thing?
Yeah.
As she tries to matador the ghost or something.
Which she does kind of do, and then chucks the silver net on the ghost, which of course makes the ghost disappear. So then she can use the silver net onto the thing that she found in the wall or behind the stone or whatever it is, which is a skull.
A skull.
So now we've got 3 heads.
With a beard. Because they were like, is this her skull? But no, it's
still got a beard. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Maybe she did have some real magic going on, because I don't think hair would stick around that long.
It's got to be attached to the skin still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gross.
It says that it's mummified. I don't know if that means that she dried it out or something, because there are ways to do that and preserve the head. But
you said that so confidently, and I'm like, what do you mean? How? I don't know.
Oh, I guess.
How do you mummify a head?
I guess I just know that because there are religions where that's a really important thing, to mummify heads and keep them around as talismans. So, like, I was like, doesn't everybody know that? Sorry. Skull is like, it's not her head. And she's like, another good reason her husband killed her, she had a beard. So that's how I know there's a beard on it.
Anyways, so they get the source.
Right away, like, her ears pop, and she's like, oh, the haunting is over. The presence is gone.
And then they're just sort of talking about her having a skull, and Lucy's like, ugh, that is so foul. And Skull's like, yeah, hanging out with a severed head. What kind of sick person would do something like that? Yeah. And Lucy's just like, I know. Jeez.
But yeah,
it's good.
That's the end of the
good
chapter.
Stuff. I really love these introduction chapters that Stroud always does, because they're always just a perfect blend of creepy and funny.
Mm-hmm. And it kicks things off in a great way with a good tone.
Yeah.
This one even kind of picks up in a way where the other ones tend to not. They tend to ignore the big reveal at the end of the book. And this one has no choice but to deal with it. You know what I mean?
Well, it ignores it in a way. Like, we still come back to it later.
It's true.
Like, and we talk about the argument that she and Lockwood had and blah, 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 blah. So we are, like, jumping ahead and then going back to details later, which is a similar style to the first 3 books. But yeah, it is immediately apparent how that turned out.
Yeah, that she's an independent agent.
As we see on the chapter art for chapter 3.
And in chapter 3...
Okay. Go.
Mr. Farnaby orders Lucy to take the source to the furnaces, and Lucy recalls the past several months on her way there.
And the chapter art is Lucy's business card.
Very legible, like literally legible. So
yeah, I can read all of it.
Yep.
Crazy.
I tried to look up the address just to see if it was like a place you could look at in London, and maybe it is, but I am too incompetent to find it with Google Maps. The part of London that it talks about is real, of course, but like I don't know how to find it.
So at the start of chapter 3, we see that Lucy's finished the job, great, and she gives this like paragraph rant about operatives being young and having psychic talent and adults being useless. And it just really struck me that if you were a young kid reading this, or like with your parents, or having it read to you by your parents, this bit would be great. If your parents had to read about how old and useless adults are. Yeah, it's great. And like, I don't think we see one good adult in this whole series. We have one okay one. And that's Barnes.
But yeah, it talks about how they're useless and stuff. And then there's this line here that I underlined. It's kind of the thing that I've been saying, where it says every agency worked like this. Every agency in London except one. But we don't say the one because she can't bear to think it. But yeah, Mr. Tony Farnaby was the Rotwell
really
supervisor.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a good name. It's really good.
Yeah. So she describes about how he'd parked himself in the marble foyer of the house close to the exits and safe within a triple circle of iron chains.
This guy.
And then Lucy sort of walks out onto the second floor balcony. She says, I could see him squatting below me like an enormous pot-bellied toad. Wow. She is just on fire tonight,
The guy's also drinking from a hip flask, so that's pretty good too.
And then there's like another man there who is Farnaby's supervisor. So
yeah,
it's just that great line where she's like, that's just the way that these companies are. The supervisors have supervisors.
Right. Johnson's a pretty important character. He'll be kind of central.
I have no memory of that.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's like news to me. Amazing. I'm glad you were here for it then.
I think he's actually the guy who in the previous book was at the center of the whole thing.
That makes sense.
So, but Johnson also reminds me of the characters who show up at the end of the previous book with their clipboards and they're all bossing Barnes around and stuff. So there's like, the supervisors to the supervisors.
The Rotwell team is getting a talking to about going back in there, even though Lucy Carlisle is probably dead.
Which is
all these things.
Always the great time to make your entrance when somebody says that.
And then there's like, the girl chose to rush off on her own instead of reporting back to me. This is the problem with freelancers. They haven't been properly trained, have they, Johnson? No, indeed. And then Lucy just being like, hello, Mr. Farnaby.
There's this thing, it makes me crazy. And he's like, these regulations are in place for your protection. And you want to argue with me, so you get 2 demerits. And I'm just like, oh my God. Like,
yeah, the demerits are infuriating.
That's exactly what I wrote. It's like, this is so infuriating.
It's great writing because it immediately puts you on the side of the kids.
Yeah.
Even if the adults had been reasonable. Even if reading this as an adult, because a lot of the time when you read children's stories as a kid, you just hate the adults. And then when you read them as an adult again, you're like, oh, wait, I can see their points here.
Yeah, but not this
right?
guy.
Not this one.
No.
You're just like, oh my God.
No.
Yeah, so it's great writing to just make sure we all understand the state of the world. The adults suck and the children are getting killed because the adults can't handle not being in charge.
it's probably because he grew up in this thing and it's like all he knows. But it is.
Oh, yeah.
It
I'm sure
sucks.
he was on the other end of the demerits and the rules and the things and all that. And so now he's like, oh, I've got power. But that's just it, right? Because they can't handle not having the power anymore.
Right.
So the kids are getting killed. And it's even worse because of that. Because he would have seen his teammates killed because of this type of action. And now he's there doing the same thing.
And he's doing the same thing. Yeah.
So honestly, I hope this guy runs into a ghost literally on his way home.
It's why he has that hip flask, you know?
Yeah. So, yeah, just great writing. Anyways, the skull says it in one line, you know, this guy's a drag.
I like that Lucy preempts, like, I'm not going to kill him. And he's like, oh, come on. We could throw the potted plant on his head.
I know. I think I wrote down, like, I too have an inner voice urging me to kill people. It's great. I love skulls so much. Anyways, they have a whole conversation about how Lucy got the source and blah, 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 blah. And then Farnaby's like, don't bring it anywhere near me. Get a silver box.
She plops it on the table next to his food, which is really good. That's a good power move.
Would you like this skull? It's great. In my head, it's very, I don't know, it's very Game of Thrones-y.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody ever plopped a severed head.
That feels like something that could happen, though.
Yeah. There's a lot of heads being chopped in that show, or squashed. Mr. Johnson does give her a well done, which, great. And then Lucy tries so hard to, like, talk up the team, which I think is so good of her, because they did abandon her. But she's like, no, it was a joint effort. Everyone played their part. And she goes on this rant about the team and how good they are. And then the team is immediately punished for it.
Yeah. He exercises his power against all the kids as much as possible.
And also, like, keep discord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because now they're not going to have good thoughts about Lucy.
Right. Yeah.
The other kids.
Yeah. They won't unify. There's a good moment here where we get, like, a little bit of what happened in the fallout of the Chelsea outbreak.
Oh, yes.
On the government side of things. So Farnaby says, it's certainly an unusual specimen. He's talking about this severed head. The sort of thing your boys at the Institute would like, eh, Johnson? Want to take it home? Mr. Johnson smiled thinly. Sadly, that's no longer possible under the new DPRAC regulations. It will have to be destroyed. So since the Chelsea outbreak, we've had some kind of legislation, or DPRAC has made a rule that any type 2 source needs to be destroyed immediately. I think this is pretty interesting because we know from the news reports that we read at the end of the previous book that the information about what was really happening was suppressed. Mm-hmm. So, like, why would this rule be put in place? And we know that, you know, from what Kipps told Lockwood, DPRAC doesn't regulate the agencies regulate DPRAC. So this feels like a move from Fitz to suppress Rotwell, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
It's kind of a perfect move because I don't feel like there would be public outcry to be like, we need to destroy sources, because I feel like the public would think that's happening anyway. For the legislators to be like, there's a new DPRAC regulation that all sources will be immediately destroyed. And the public's like, oh, good. Yeah, they're doing a good job over there and really saving us. While it's really like a behind the scenes power move, like it's all very, you know, like hard boiled detective noir, the world sucks kind of stuff. That's really, really good.
Yeah, I agree. So then the dude sort of tasks Lucy, who I almost called Carlisle because I was just looking at her last name in the book, with taking the skull to the furnaces to be immediately destroyed. The new skull, not skull.
Right.
And that's sort of her punishment for making him look bad. And then the rest of the team has to go on a second job that night to go deal with the changer. And Ted gets 5 more demerits, I think. And it's just terrible.
Yeah.
And I wrote down that I hope that changer kills him. Like, I hope it gets him, even through his 3 sets of iron chains.
His whole thing reminds me of like the math teacher who would be like, well, I don't care that you keep getting the right answer because you're not showing your work in the way that I taught you to do it. Like you figured out your own way. He's like
or like the teacher that gets something a little bit wrong on the board, but then has no other recourse other than to double down on it.
Yeah.
Even though
And yell
it's
at the
math or
kids.
science or something,
Like,
and you
can't
prove
argue
that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's terrible. He's awful, which is perfect. It's good.
Yeah, it's great. And especially since I don't think we ever see him again. So then the teams go their separate ways, and Lucy and Skull kind of go off on her own, and we get a little bit of this is what Lucy's been doing. Mm-hmm. We just get her, like, she says, this is just how things were, part of the deal of my new freelance life. And then we get, like, from the start, I'd done things properly, and blah, blah, blah. She made a card. She got her own place. And she'd been getting lots of work because it had been such a bad winter, and there was a lot of ghost activity.
And he says, too, that, like, it's still the Black Winter, like what we were talking about in the previous book. How it was like, it's the Black Winter, and she's like, it's still the Black Winter.
Yeah, so not much time has passed.
Right.
It's been a couple weeks, maybe a month or two.
I think she's saying that now things like the spring flowers are starting to poke up, and the days are getting longer and longer. So it seems like
So if we think book 3 was like October, November,
yeah,
this is probably February, March.
Yeah, something like that. So some time has passed. She was able to get her own place. She made business cards. She's worked with various agencies and had success. And
then we get a little bit about Lockwood and Co.
Yeah.
And about how they have also been doing well, and how she gives a little sentence about Lockwood and George, and then is like, oh yeah, and Holly. Which I love. Still petty.
She said, yeah, that's funny. She says, like, I was very good at what I did. Of course I was. I'd learned my trade with the best. And I wasn't with them anymore. And it just kept, like, I was like, yeah, you're still not saying who them is and they.
But then she does.
And she's, one of these. Nevertheless, the difficulties of the season had enabled some companies to thrive. One of these was Lockwood and Co., the smallest psychic detective agency in London. And so, like, if this is your first Lockwood and Co. book, you'd be like, it says Lockwood and Co. on the cover, and be like, oh, okay, now I'm hearing about it. Oh, I see. She was part of Lockwood. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is where she actually starts to open up and talk about all of them and name names and things like that.
Yeah. And so she gives a little talk about how well Lockwood and Co. have been doing with the Black Winter and all the jobs they've been getting and how often they've been in the newspaper and all that. And then she says, but I was flourishing too, and I was succeeding on my own. And then she has this line where she's like, did I mind being on my own? Not really. For the most part, I got along fine. I'm fine. I get busy. Great. No one could say I don't get out much. I have so much work.
Right. Yeah. Everything we've seen, like, undermines that. She doesn't just miss them. Like, I feel like she needs them.
And she does say the nights were frantic, packed with incident. It was the days that sometimes felt a little hollow, particularly at dawn, after just finishing a case, when I walked back through the empty streets, bruised and weary, with the weight of the solitary hours ahead pulling at my insides. That sounds real sad.
Mm-hmm. And she talks about how even Skull isn't there for her because he tends to retreat in the daytime anyway. So
yeah,
she's lonely. This has all the vibes to me of, like, I don't know, like being 20, 21. For me, I moved out of the dorms and into an apartment and, like, had a couple of jobs and stuff. And it was just like working my ass off and going to school when I could. And it was like, do you have time for friends or lovers? Like, not really. I'm just trying to survive, you know? That's how it is.
Yeah. I had a very different experience of that age.
Well, I mean, for some people, that's like their best time, I've heard, but it wasn't.
Well, I wouldn't call it that. It was just, I have a very different relationship with my family than you do.
Yeah.
So I just stayed living with my mom.
Yeah.
For a while, especially here because it's so expensive to live here. So that's not weird here to stay living with your parents into your 20s.
I don't think it's weird at all.
No, I don't think it's weird at all, but some people do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
People should do that. Yeah. If they can, if it's safe.
especially since there's so many. If you're in a big city, there's usually a lot of different cultures around you, and some of those cultures, like, you just stay with your family.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I don't know. I just identified a lot with Lucy here. I was like, yeah, this is like early adulthood. Like, she's trying to get something going, and she's all of her time is work, and that's all there's room for.
I will say I did feel very, this is what being an adult is. Are you sure? Like at that age, probably maybe some of that had to do with it, because like I was still at home and a lot of my friends were still living at home, which means since these were my high school friends, so we all lived within 2 blocks of each other basically still.
Sure.
That's why I didn't really feel lonely or anything. And it wasn't until we all started moving out and stuff that it's like, oh, now we all live in completely different parts of the city and it's difficult to see each other.
It's worse when people start getting married and having kids, and then it's like,
then it's difficult.
Yeah, then it's really hard.
I would also, just to finish off our thing, I think it is more common in America because so much of your culture is based around independence.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you're forced into it by society norms a lot younger than you really should be.
Well, yeah. I mean, in my case, it's like what you said. It was weaponized against me in my case. There was no...
Yeah.
It was
and also it depends what your what your home situation is like and that sort of thing.
But I was like, yeah, I know what that's like. You gave the whole day your all, and it was like, it felt like a waste because none of it was what you wanted to be doing, and then you go home and go to sleep so that you can get up and do it again. And it was like, it's really hard to do that.
I feel like that now, but
yeah,
not in like a sad way, but just in a, I work and then I relax and then I work and then
Yep.
I don't know. Some days are just like, well, that was a day.
Yeah.
There was no point to it.
Certainly did happen. Yeah.
That day happened. I guess, if I do die, it won't really matter. I don't feel like that all the time. Just some days are wow.
But I think this captures that feeling. And so I was
yes, absolutely.
Relatable.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times with these types of books, it's like high adventure. It's the fantasy that moves you away from being trapped in the childhood. And this is really capturing something about adulthood that I think the book is going to investigate, like, how do you get out of that? And the answer is other people, peers, friendships, lovers, all of that stuff it makes your life richer than the grind.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's why how old am I? 38? Yeah, I'm 38 years old, right? And I still genuinely enjoy reading some children's books. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, because some do feel condescending to me, though I've been told by other adults or children that they don't feel that way. But some of them take these things that we experience as adults and put them into words and feelings and situations that children can appreciate and learn from. And so, then when they do feel them later on, they have like a
context, yeah.
Like a context and a skill set to think about them and be with them and remember that, Lucy got over it by being with her friends and her family. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think a lot of the children's books are so worth reading when you're an adult, and they're still good. And they're good, but also they have merit, which is not always the same thing.
Kids, all you need is a talking skull, and you're going to be okay.
Yep. That's what I should just put all my friends as like their context. Talking Skull 1, Talking Skull 2. I have a lot of friends though, so it'd be like Talking Skull 33. Oh God, best joke. I forgot about punk rock and joke. It's been so long since we did this. Not really. Although I should say I wanted to start earlier, but somebody had to go on a family vacation, so.
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
There's something to be said about not having any responsibilities. The best joke is definitely something Skull said.
Is it the random body parts joke?
I did really like the random body parts, yeah. Or the nearer to the end when he's like, yeah, who would spend all their time with a skull?
I kind of felt like it's that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one that I marked down. Where he's like, who would hang out with a skull? What kind of person does that?
Yeah, geez.
It's good.
And punk rock, it's got to be Lucy, plopping that skull down on the table and being like,
really
I did it. Yeah.
Next to his sandwich, and he's like, ah!
Yeah.
That's another one that I can see in my head where the camera would be like right up close to the sandwich, and then all of a sudden, like, bonk.
Boom.
Here's this head.
That has got to have been, like, I've got to have seen that similar scene in a show or a movie before, because I can see it so clearly. I just can't like put the actual scene in my head so I can name the show or the movie, and it's driving me bananas.
But Lucy is like very punk rock in all of these chapters, I feel like.
Yes, I love it. I know that these chapters are like only Lucy as far as the main cast goes, but I do love when Lucy gets the most punk rock moment. Coming
out of the third book, you do feel like she had a lot of losses. Like she had a lot of L's. And when she's in this, you're like, no, she is like a great agent. When you see her up against these other kids, you're like, oh my God, what a bunch of losers.
But I think that feeling, because it's not just Lucy who you feel that in this book, and I think that's why it's my favorite book. Yeah. Like, the agency fell apart, the communication fell apart, all these things. And then when it comes back in this book, it comes back stronger and better. Mm-hmm. And like when the team all comes back together, you really feel it. And I think that's why this is my favorite book. Like the plot is good, the characters are great, but everyone coming back for a big win together after how depressing book 3 was and how apart everyone was in book 3, it feels good. When you run away to London and you have to take whatever you can get, that's different than like making the choice of like, this is what I want, this is what I'm building. Yeah. All right. So if you want to comment on any of the things that we said today, the short therapy session we had there at the end, you can follow the show on Twitter at Lockwood Podcast. And you can follow me on Instagram at Inferior Kate Reads. It's like every episode is like this. I know. We always have one bit where we're like, we don't mean to do it. It's not part of the format of the show. It just happens. We don't have any notes on it or anything. It's just like, let me tell you my childhood trauma, and then you can have your childhood trauma, and then blah, 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 blah. Send your childhood trauma to contact@hollowedgroundmedia.com through an email, or you can go to hollowedgroundmedia.com and scroll down to the bottom and fill out the contact form. And remember that everyone needs a skull companion.